A man received a promotion to the position of vice president of the company he worked for. The promotion went to his head, and for weeks on end he bragged to anyone and everyone that he was now the VP. His bragging came to an abrupt halt, though, when his wife, so embarrassed by his behavior, said, "Listen, Bob, it's not that big a deal. These days, everyone's a vice president. Why, they even have a vice president of peas down at the local market." Somewhat deflated, Bob called the local supermarket to find out if this was even true. "Can I speak to the vice president of peas, please?" he asked. To which the reply came, "Peas, you said, right? You looking for the VP of fresh or the VP of frozen?" Now, that's cute, right? And it also illustrates what we typically consider the basic point about humility from a religious perspective. It's important to be humble, it's important not to be too proud, it's important not to have too big of an ego. Jesus says at the end of the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector in Luke chapter 18, verse 14, "All who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted." In Judaism, in the Hebrew Scriptures, Saul, Israel's first king, was commanded in Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 20, that he must not exalt himself above other members of the community. Religious Humility 101. Don't get too big for your britches. Nobody likes that. And most who write or philosophize about humility identify that it's something that is hard to gain on purpose. A Jewish Hasidic tale tells of a man who came to the Tzaddik with a complaint. A Tzaddik is a spiritual leader of a Hasidic community. "All my life," this man said, "I have tried to follow the advice of the rabbis that one who runs away from fame will find that fame pursues him. And yet, while I constantly am running away from fame, fame never seems to pursue me." The Tzaddik replied, "The trouble is that while you do run away from fame, you are always looking over your shoulder to see if fame is chasing you." Indeed, striving for humility can all too easily become a form of pride itself. Now, I don't think there's a lot of genuine argument to be had about humility as a virtue. People generally agree that a lack of humility, too much pride, too much ego, is not a good thing. The trickier part is living into the value. Living a humble life is hard enough to do that we offer great praise to those who exemplify humility the most. Mother Teresa, for example, is a shining beacon of humility personified. And the new Pope, Pope Francis, has also been lauded for his humility, for his shedding of the trappings of luxury that many previous popes embraced, so that he may attempt as best he can to truly lead the humble life he believes his faith calls him to. There's a common misconception about humility, though, which is that to be humble means to be small. For humble and humiliation both come from the same Latin roots, humilis, meaning low, and humus, meaning earth. To humiliate someone, of course, is to make them feel small and shamed. And we see it in phrases like getting served some humble pie. Too often in the history of the world religions, the call for humility has been misunderstood or misapplied as a call to smallness, a call to servitude, a call to ultimately live in a place of shame and fear. Poet Naomi Raplansky writes of this in her poem titled "Housing Shortage." "I tried to live small," she says. "I tried to live small. I took a narrow bed. I held my elbows to my sides. I tried to step carefully and to think softly and to breathe shallowly in my portion of air and to disturb no one." I don't think this living small is the kind of humility that Jesus or Moses or the Buddha intended. And yet, it is a place that many of us live out of, whether we consider it a form of humility or not. Small is a place that many of us live out of, whether we are intentional or conscious of it or not. Now, I don't know if this passage in this sense of smallness resonates for you or not. I imagine to some of us here today it does, but for others there may not be an immediate connection. And if you're in that group, Maybe hearing a story will help. The story I'm going to share is my story, though it could easily be thousands upon thousands of other people's stories as well, each with their own variation and variety. But my story is this. Growing up, I was always very smart, but for the longest time, very socially awkward. Unsurprisingly, I got teased and bullied a fair amount, and I learned that in many ways, I was safest when I was smallest. If you don't get noticed, you usually don't get picked on. Now, my grades were usually between me and my teachers, so I didn't need to be small there, but I learned to be small in other ways, especially in social situations. As but one example, in 7th grade, I had this awesome pair of Nike sneakers that had these really cool neon green and orange zigzags on them. They were the best thing ever. And then one day, some kid decided to start picking on me about them, and a few other kids picked it up, and it wasn't more than a day or two of this harassment before I insisted to my dad that he take me to buy a new pair of sneakers. And I changed my shoes, and the teasing stopped. This happened on more than one occasion over my childhood. It actually makes me a little sad looking back, because if you look at my mom's photo albums of my childhood, you see a kid who liked funky clothing. There was the wild jumbo print shorts I had in one picture, and the funky blue-green tie-dye in another. But I learned to hide that part of me over time, to dress in clothes that would bring the least amount of teasing and rejection. And I struggle to overcome that smallness in my wardrobe today. You won't find much of anything in my closet that's crazy or funky these days. Pretty much solid colors and stripes through and through. Despite me knowing better in my head, despite my awareness of this pattern in my life, when it comes time to buy clothes, I just can't do it. With my clothing, I stay safe. It feels like the only choice available to me still. Now, clothing may be a relatively small thing, but this kind of thing happens to so many of us in so many different ways. For too many of us, either in many areas of our life, or in some areas of our life, or perhaps in just one or two, we live small. And living small doesn't do any of us any good, least of all ourselves. The rest of Naomi Rapansky's poem reads like this. I tried to live small. I took a narrow bed. I held my elbows to my sides. I tried to step carefully and to think softly and to breathe shallowly in my portion of air and to disturb no one. Yet see how I spread out, and I cannot help it. I take to myself more and more, and I take nothing that I do not need. But my needs grow like weeds, all over and invading. I clutter this place with all the apparatus of living. You stumble over it daily. And then my lungs take their fill, and then you gasp for air. Excuse me for living, but since I am living, given inches, I take yards. Taking yards, dream of miles, and a landscape unbounded and vast and abandoned. You too, dreaming the same. We have a need within us, all of us, to not be too small, to have the time and space and care and support and love to be our full selves. Not too big, not overly big, but not too small either. Just right-sized. And right-sized, this is the definition of humility which I want to lift up for us today. A definition that I'm guessing Jesus and Moses and the Buddha would all embrace. Healthy humility as a virtue means to be right-sized. Not too big, not too small, but just right. Healthy, right-sized humility means standing up so that your wants and needs are just as important as anyone else's. Healthy, right-sized humility means standing up and claiming the power we all have to make a difference in this world. Healthy, right-sized humility means not being afraid to let our lights shine. Now, healthy humility is a virtue that deserves thought and attention, and it deserves thought and attention as well within Unitarian Universalism. Because too often, we Unitarian Universalists can live at both ends of the spectrum. Too often we become fundamentalists in our own right and think we UUs have all the answers, and that anyone who thinks different from us is wrong and irrational and maybe even stupid. This shows up when we say things like, well, we're the rational ones, because every other religious person in the world is irrational. That's the implication of statements like that. A fundamentalist Unitarian Universalist who thinks that Unitarian Universalism has the only reasonable answer, who thinks that their version of Unitarian Universalism is the only true and right path, a fundamentalist UU is just as dangerous as a fundamentalist from any other religious tradition. And then, of course, too often, we Unitarian Universalists also live at the other end of the spectrum. We live too small. We have a message that is desperately needed in these times when a sexist, racist, xenophobic, sexual assaulting, temper tantrum throwing candidate can win a major party nomination and get 40% of the vote, no matter what he says or does. Our message of embracing love and inclusivity, of equality and justice for all, this message is desperately needed in these times. And yet, we hold back. Says our current National Association President, Peter Morales, fear holds us back. We are afraid of failure, afraid of looking silly. We are afraid, no, that is too mild. We are paranoid, he says, about losing our individual independence. At some deep level, we are also afraid of succeeding. We are afraid of the responsibility that comes with owning our power. Now, this is not the kind of thing that anyone likes to admit to themselves, either as an individual or as an organization. And my initial response to statements like this on the gut level is always to defend us, to say, no, that's not true. We Unitarian Universalists, we're better than that. But then I let the words sink in, and I think about how, while our national membership numbers have held steady, the population of the United States is growing, and so we're shrinking as a faith tradition in terms of our percentage of the population. And I think about how we have this powerful message in a time that needs it, that seems so perfectly attuned to what the country is calling out for right now, and yet we're shrinking. I think of these things, and despite my fierce protective desire to shout at Peter, no, that's not us, I worry. I fear that he is right. I even perhaps know in some part of myself that doesn't want to admit it. He has a point. What is true of us in Unitarian Universalism, that we sometimes land in the unhealthy place of being on opposite ends of the humility spectrum, either too much pride or not enough, is also true of us in our lives. If we are to live into a value and belief of the importance of humility, if we are able to practice a healthy humility, we need to try and seek the middle ground. We need to aspire to living right-sized. And there is one more thing we need to get clear about. Being right-sized doesn't mean being modest or restrained or average. Healthy humility doesn't mean we just shoot for mediocrity. Healthy humility means we need to let our lights shine. Healthy humility means striving to be the kind of person Uriah Mountain Dreamer called us to be in our reading this morning, where we ache for and dare to dream of meeting our heart's longing, where we can dance with wildness and let that ecstasy fill us to the tips of our fingers and toes without cautioning to be careful, to be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. Where we stand in the center of the fire and do not shrink back. Too often, fear, shame, or anxiety gets in the way of our living. Author Marianne Williamson has a response, a rebuttal even, to this fear. Our deepest fear, she writes, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. She concludes, as we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Now, the God language, of course, isn't going to work for all of us, but the message is powerful and clear. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? And the response, actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. We are all meant to shine. There's even a little bit of Unitarian Universalist theology. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. As in our first principle, everyone has inherent worth and dignity. Letting your light shine is not getting a big ego. It's not about being too proud, thinking too much of yourself. It is about letting yourself reach your fullest potential, a fullest self which by definition is acting and living from a place that is grounded and down to earth. Let's also be clear, letting your light shine is not about flipping a light switch, magically eliminating all your fear, shame, and anxiety in a single go, and transforming yourself in an instant. It's about setting an intention, choosing an attitude, and putting in the hard work over time to let your brightest self shine forth. Our task can be complicated, and it also can be easy, as is suggested to us by Jean Olsen in her poem, Within the Light. Headlights, taillights, going, coming, it does not matter inside. Draw a curtain across the window, lock the door, and break the key. Let the interior deepen and broaden until it exceeds this little room. You will go out when you are ready, when the tiny inner self no longer fits. Awareness will come, bliss is not the goal. Pure consciousness, a word to the stranger. Become, friend, that is all. Become. Fill our inner rooms. Overflow out into the world. Take yards, dream of miles. Let your light shine. As our picture this morning shows, our lights do not stand alone. They are all interconnected. If each one of us was to set aside our fears and anxieties and step into our fullest selves, if each one of us were to truly let our lights shine, can you imagine what life would be like? If we were to set aside our fears and anxieties and step into our fullest selves as a congregation, can you imagine what our church might become? If we were all to set aside our fears and anxieties and step into our fullest selves as a nation, can you imagine how our country might be transformed? Living with a healthy, right-sized humility, letting our light shine, does not mean being too big. It does not mean having ego. It does not mean operating from a place of fear, shame, anxiety, or insecurity. It does mean finding the true, good fullness within ourselves and giving ourselves the permission to let that goodness bloom and flower out into the world. Friends, may we bring a healthy, right-sized humility to our lives, to our church, and to the world. May we dare to dream of meeting our heart's longings. May we be the kind of people who stand in the center of the fire and do not shrink back. May we fill the inner rooms of our souls and overflow out into the world. May you bring a healthy, right-sized humility into your life. May your light shine.